Welcome back to another episode of Fox Can Fix It. We are once again back at work on the 73 Pontiac Ventura, and it's time to replace the intake and carb. And that all starts right down here. So one of the first things we've got to do when replacing an intake, at least one like this, is you've got to get your antifreeze down below the level of the intake. And it meets right here at the head. This is the crossover, so we've got to get the antifreeze down probably somewhere down around water pump level. And actually, if you're going to do that, you might as well just swap it all. So, like I said just a minute ago, this whole intake swap starts right down here at the radiator drain, which is right there. So we're going to loosen that, drain all this antifreeze out, and then while that happens, we'll take a look at the intake I bought. The intake I got is an aluminum Edelbrock P4B, and P4B I believe stands for Pontiac 4 Barrel. Somebody check me on that. I'm about 50% sure that that's true. It is a dual plane, so it's going to be better for street use than strip use. And also, it is about the same stock height. There's not a whole lot of room under the hood for intake, carb, and air cleaner. It's pretty close to the stock height on this, so I shouldn't have too much trouble, although I will have to get a different air cleaner because this is a much wider opening than the Rochester 2-jet, so I have to get definitely a new air cleaner, probably just an open element like 10 or 14 inch air cleaner. Whatever works. Should be fine. Pros and cons of this intake. It's aluminum, so it is lighter than the stock cast iron that's on there. By how much? I don't know, probably by 75%. This only weighs like 10 pounds. The stock cast iron probably weighs upwards of 50. I'm just going to guess. I could be wrong. I don't know. This does not have a provision for a thermal choke, so if I want a choke, other than a manual choke that's on this carburetor I borrowed, I will have to run an electric choke. Not a big problem, so nothing there, but that is a difference. The factory was a thermal. There is no EGR setup for this. My current 73 Ventura does have an EGR intake. Somewhere around here is the EGR, and this doesn't have it. And pros, it doesn't have an EGR. Cons, none. It doesn't have an EGR, and that's fine with me. Other than that, some of the good things about the Pontiac as opposed to regular small block Chevy is regular small block Chevy, the distributor goes here, and it goes in the same place in the Pontiac. However, small block Chevy, the intake comes all the way out here, and you've got to pull that distributor out to get the intake off. So it's kind of nice that I'm not going to have to pull the distributor and mess with timing or anything just to get this intake off. I like that. This is a 4-barrel, not huge. It's actually a little small, depending on the RPM you run with whatever cam you run in this 350. But 600 CFM should be fine for now. I don't really plan on revving this thing over like 5,000 RPMs. So doing the math on it, a borrowed 600 CFM will do just fine for now. Vacuum secondary, not a double pumper. I'm okay with that. And I might have to change my fuel line setup because currently my fuel line goes in here on my 2-jet, and that's the fuel inlet on this Holley. So that may have to be changed. And we're definitely going to have to swap over all the little vacuum fittings and plugs that are on the other intake. Sorry. So that coolant should be drained. Let's go see what I did wrong, and then we'll look at getting that intake off. Well, that did not work out the way I wanted it to. However, it did get drained, but it unthreaded the entire drain cock from the radiator instead of just this piece spinning, so we're going to have to clean that up so that we can get this piece to actually close next time. So, but we'll replace this little O-ring at the bottom while it's out. So maybe it's not a bad thing. All right, on to the next step. Taking this intake off is not all that incredibly complicated. You don't have to remove the carburetor because we're replacing that as well. So really, fuel line and your throttle linkage is all you've got to take off for the carburetor. Next, you've got to take your thermostat housing off. I'm going to just take the hose off because I need to swap this over to the new intake. So I'm going to actually leave these on and take the hose off. However, you will have to undo this nut to get this alternator bracket off because it is in the way. A couple vacuum lines to undo, Pcv valve. You're going to want to pop that because that goes all the way down in the valley pan, and we're not removing that. On the back side, all we're going to do is make sure that everything's out of the way. I don't have power brakes, so there is no big vacuum line going that way. Don't have to worry about disconnecting that. And that's about it. There's going to be, I don't know, a dozen or so bolts on, you know, 6 on one side, 6 on the other, maybe 5, maybe 7, I don't know, I didn't count them yet. There's going to be roughly a dozen bolts that hold this intake down that we'll have to take off after that. Only thing that's going to be hard about this is it's heavy. One thing I almost forgot, when you're taking these bolts out, line them up on your fender or wherever you're keeping them in order front to back so you know which one goes where. Just makes it a little bit easier. One thing of note, there is a bolt right here, and it is a longer bolt, just like this. It goes down here, and it actually bolts the water pump to the front of the intake where it seals. It doesn't have the little 3-inch long hose like Chevy small block has for like a water pump bypass. It's actually direct connected to the intake, and there's an O-ring, so this bolt snugs the intake up to the water pump. Don't forget to take this out, or nothing's going to move. Try to give it the old heave-ho. Oh. Just, this has to, I mean, come on, seriously, how much does this weigh? I bet it weighs half of me. No, probably not, but a third. Remember that thing about like, hey, take the PCV valve out because it's down in the valley pan. Yeah, I just forgot to do that. All right. Oh. All right, so underneath this intake, it does have this valley pan, so the intake is not completely sealed to the front and back of the block. This valley pan does that job, and when you have that, you have lots of squirrels using it for their local storage over the winter. We'll clean that out, don't worry about it. Everything else looks pretty good though. The gaskets came off with it. Not going to be a lot to scrape. The ports look pretty good. Really not too carboned up. I mean, yeah, there's some, but I've seen a lot worse on a lot newer cars. That's really not bad at all. So, passages look pretty clean. I'll take it. We're going to have to swap this over. This is like a temperature-based vacuum port. That's going to go here in this coolant passage. This is a vacuum port that appears that I'm going to have to put it here. I don't know that there'll be room here for it, but we'll take this off and we'll try to use that as well because I think I might have a use for it. Other than that, it's a direct swap, so we're going to go clean up the engine and put these new manifold gaskets on and get this intake put on. Make sure at the front where the crossover is, you do put a little bit of silicone on both sides of the gasket. And then when you go to line it up, there's no studs or dowels or anything. Pontiac, again, does things slightly differently. Pontiac actually comes with these little orange retainers. Like, what in the world are those for? Well, this bolt hole right here and the one at the very back on both sides are actually cut to receive the inside of this edge. And all you do is line it up there, tap it, and that's going to hold your gasket in place. Now, is this going to cause an intake leak? Probably not. It'll be fine. But that's a really cool setup. I like that a lot. And these are already sealed pretty good, but it does not hurt. You don't need to make an O-ring. You just need a little bit that can fill in any imperfections in this manifold that I'm putting on, because it is a used manifold. Now, to make my life about 9 times easier, I've taken the carburetor and everything off. Since it wasn't bolted down anyways, it was just there for demonstration purposes. But, I mean, I can one-hand this intake manifold. So it's way lighter. You just have to sneak it back past this transmission, kick down vacuum hose, and line everything up and drop it down nice and easy. Don't pinch any wires, don't pinch any hoses or lines. Get your bolt holes generally lined up. And there we go. First bolt I want to put in is this one for the water pump to intake, and that actually goes right here and threads in. And that's what we're going to do first before the silicone sets up. So I've got this bolt not quite snug. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put all the other bolts in the intake and snug them down, then we'll tighten this one last. And since you've seen me take it off, it goes back on the same order. Let's go. It's time to torque all these intake bolts down. I'm just going to go with the old torque arm and guesstimate the amount of torque it's actually going to need, but I will do it in an X pattern, inside out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever you need to do. Basically, you're crossing it from inside out, just like you do any other torque pattern on anything you don't want to warp. All right, that's going to do it for today. As you can see, the intake's on and bolted down. I've got a couple accessory brackets and things I need for the carburetor to make it all work. But the big job of getting the heavy intake off and the new one on is done. So we'll finish this up next time and get it started and see how it runs. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you later.